Now, don't think that you're done with the control phase. We've got our measures, we understand how to take a look at the real-time process, but what we have to do is we have to create a plan to make sure that those measures actually get the type of control action by the people in the daily management system. The tool that we use for doing this is called a process control plan. So what I want to do is just sort of introduce you to the idea of a process control plan. What it does is it assures that the project is actually ready to be completed. If I can't complete a control plan, what it means is some of the key elements haven't really been agreed to in the process. So the control plan should be part of the work instruction because it's going to say, how do we control that work? It may be part of the procedure because it's saying across those work instructions, how do we control that work? And so what it has to do is identify the performance measure, specify the limits and the process by which measurement is done, and the limits upon which control or responsibility and action is going to be taken care of. So if I haven't filled in this data, that means it's just sort of a work instruction, something to be filled in. But once it is fulfilled and we've completed all of that information, then the control plan is actually part of the standard work agreement. So there are three stages in developing a control plan. The first is we have to identify what are the critical parameters we're going to measure. In this process, in this activity, in this task, what is the key variable that we have for the inputs? What are the X variables in the process? What is the key deliverable or the key output variable? What's the quality characteristic we have about those measures? Do we want to increase it? Do we want to keep it controlled? Do we want to reduce it? And then within what limits? So we have our specification limits. If I want to keep it in a state of control, what is the target? What are the upper-lower limits? If I want to keep it increased, then what is the lowest acceptable level of performance? If I want to keep it decreased, what's the highest acceptable level of performance? And then for each of those measures, we should say, how are we going to measure it? What's the methodology? What's the capability of our current system? So we understand the measurement devices we use, the scales that we're going to be measured. What's the sample size we're going to take to check it? How often do we have the sampling or the sampling frequency? Who's responsible for taking the samples? Where are they going to capture that sample? So we have the procedure. What is the place that we're going to record this information? And when did we last calibrate those measurement systems to assure that they're going to give us standard measures? And then the final component is taking a look at the response characterization. When we have a change, how much change is acceptable? At what point in time do we have an action limit? In other words, if the performance gets to here, we're going to do something to adjust the process. Otherwise, we let the process operate within its natural range of variation. What's the decision rule we do when we actually get to that level of performance and we exceed the action limit? What is the countermeasure we're going to put in place? And then finally, what is the standard operating procedure or the reference we have that describes this measurement system and how we're going to manage it in the future? So what we see is that these control plans are going to manage key elements of the quality management system of a particular work process performance. So this is a fundamental control document for the daily management system. So we have one more thing to cover before we can get you done with the Greenbelt project, and you can now move on to doing other things in your job or your vocation.